When someone steps back, it reveals emotional discipline, and that's what pulls a woman in. Space forces clarity. Distance highlights self-worth. Scarcity creates value. She begins to see who's real. Women trust the energy that doesn't beg, chase, or crumble. True attraction grows where emotional control exists. Women are drawn to certainty, not pursuit. Certainty is not loud, it's not dramatic, and it's not coated in constant reassurance. It's a quiet, stable confidence that communicates without words. I know who I am, and I know what I'm doing. That energy is magnetic because it makes a woman feel emotionally safe. Pursuit, on the other hand, often comes from a place of anxiety, a fear of losing her, a fear of being replaced, a fear of not being enough. And nothing repels feminine energy faster than someone who is operating from fear rather than grounded presence. Certainty is powerful because it removes confusion. Women don't need someone to chase. What they want is someone who stands firm in themselves. When the energy is stable, she feels free to relax into her natural softness. She feels free to be intuitive, expressive, and emotionally open because she senses that she's interacting with someone who is not shaken by temporary distance or emotional waves. Certainty tells her, without any pressure, that she's dealing with someone who won't dissolve when things get difficult. That's why it feels attractive. It's not the effort that matters. It's the emotional foundation behind the effort. Pursuit can easily cross into neediness, and neediness signals that the other person's sense of worth depends on her response. That becomes heavy. It puts her in the position of emotional caretaker rather than partner. But certainty removes that weight. It tells her she is free to choose. That freedom is what awakens attraction. A woman is drawn to someone whose presence doesn't demand approval, whose actions aren't desperate for validation, and whose energy doesn't scream, "Please choose me." Certainty says, "I'm good with or without an outcome." And that emotional independence is irresistible. When certainty is present, a woman feels the difference instantly. The conversations feel calmer. The connection feels more natural. The interactions feel less like a performance and more like an experience. Certainty brings ease. Pursuit brings pressure. And women feel pressured long before anyone even says a word. A woman's intuition is sharp. She can sense the energy behind someone's attention immediately. If the energy feels rushed or anxious, she instinctively steps back. If the energy feels grounded, she naturally leans in. Certainty also signals self-respect. It shows that the person doesn't lose themselves in emotions or chase validation to feel complete. Instead, there's a quiet assurance that life is full, meaningful, and balanced, and that a relationship is an addition, not a lifeline. That message, without being spoken, is what draws feminine energy closer. Women desire someone whose emotional world is intact, someone who stands still even when they care, someone who doesn't push, force, or chase because they don't need to. In the end, certainty is not about being distant. It's about being centered. It's about knowing your worth so deeply that you don't need to prove it. That's the energy women move toward, not pursuit, not pressure, just pure certainty. Space creates clarity. When there is distance, the noise fades, the emotional fog clears, and the truth becomes impossible to ignore. Space is not a punishment. It's a mirror. It reflects what was hidden under constant communication, constant validation, and constant availability. When someone steps back, a woman suddenly has room to feel her own emotions without interference. She begins to see what was real connection and what was simply habit, attachment, or comfort. Clarity arrives when the chaos stops, and space is what forces everything to slow down. When there is space, the mind recalibrates. All the distractions that were once disguised as connection get stripped away. Overthinking gets quieter. The need for instant answers weakens. And what's left is the truth about how she genuinely feels. In closeness, emotions can overlap, intentions can blur, but in space, she begins to notice what matters and what never did. She'll feel the difference between missing someone because of genuine connection and missing them because they used to fill a void. Clarity shows her the difference, and that difference can change everything. Space also reveals emotional patterns. When someone steps back, her reactions tell her more about herself than anything else. Does she feel calm or anxious? Does she feel relieved or unsettled? Does she reach out because she truly values the connection or because she fears losing attention? Those answers don't show up when someone is constantly present. They emerge when the energy shifts, when the silence replaces the comfort of constant communication. That silence exposes the truth. Space forces a woman to evaluate the connection from a higher perspective. Without the intensity of constant interaction, her intuition becomes louder. Her instincts become sharper. She begins to ask herself, was I appreciated? Was I respected? Was I giving too much? Was I receiving too little? These questions only surface when the emotional dust settles, and space is what clears that dust. In closeness, emotions get tangled. In distance, they separate, and that separation brings understanding. Space also reveals effort. When there is no chase, no pressure, no expectation, she becomes aware of her own desires. If she moves forward willingly, it's real. If she fades away, that's real too. Space removes the illusion of mutual interest and exposes what the heart actually wants. Clarity comes because actions become honest again. Without the emotional noise, without the performance, without the push and pull, everything becomes transparent. And the truth is, space activates reflection. It allows her to see the connection for what it was, not what she wished it to be. It brings honesty in a way closeness never could. It shows her how she truly felt, how much she valued the other person, and whether her emotions were rooted in love, fear, or attachment. Space creates clarity because it forces her to sit with herself without distraction, without validation, without someone else's energy influencing her own. Space is not the end of connection. It's the beginning of awareness. It gives her the emotional room to breathe, to think, to see clearly, and to feel truthfully. Space strips the illusions away, and clarity is what remains. Pulling back shifts the power dynamic. It changes the emotional rhythm of the connection, not by force, but by energy. When someone pulls back, the imbalance that once existed begins to correct itself. The dynamic where one person was giving more, trying harder, or investing faster suddenly dissolves. The moment the energy reverses, the person who once had emotional certainty begins to feel the absence. And that shift is powerful because it reveals what was previously invisible. When someone steps back, a woman is no longer in the position of receiving constant attention or reassurance. Instead, she begins to notice the impact of the silence. She notices the absence of the validation she once took for granted. She notices the difference between being pursued and being met halfway. That awareness triggers reflection, and reflection changes the dynamic. The focus is no longer on what the other person feels, it's on what she feels. That's the shift. Her emotions suddenly come to the forefront. Pulling back also shifts the power dynamic by restoring emotional equilibrium. When one person is too available, too accommodating, or too eager, the other becomes complacent, not intentionally, but naturally. Humans adapt to whatever feels predictable. When the energy is always there, it doesn't feel valuable. But when it steps back, its value becomes undeniable. The once abundant attention becomes a rare currency. and rare things naturally command more respect, more intention, and more effort. The shift also occurs because pulling back removes pressure. When someone is constantly pursuing, chasing, or over-efforting, the dynamic becomes lopsided. One person is leaning in too much and the other unconsciously leans back. But the moment the pursuit stops, the leaning reverses. She starts leaning in, not because she's forced to, but because the energy invites it. The space creates curiosity. The distance creates awareness. The stop creates interest. That's how the power dynamic shifts, through absence, not through force. Pulling back recenters self-worth. It silently communicates, I won't overextend where I'm not met. That energy is powerful because it's rooted in self-respect, not manipulation. And women can feel that difference instantly. When someone pulls back out of strength, not spite, the connection recalibrates. She begins to reflect on her own actions, her own effort, and her own intentions. She begins to take accountability for her role in the connection. And accountability is where genuine attraction grows. This shift in dynamic also reveals commitment. When the energy pulls back, her response becomes the truth. Does she reach out? Does she try? Does she let it fade? Her actions reveal everything that words could never express. Pulling back exposes authenticity. It shows who values the connection enough to step forward and who only valued it when it required no effort. And most importantly, pulling back gives a woman the chance to choose. When the dynamic is one-sided, she never has to make a decision. But when the energy stops overflowing, she must decide whether the connection matters to her. That decision shifts the power from assumption to clarity. Pulling back doesn't weaken the connection, it balances it. It transforms pursuit into mutual interest, effort into reciprocity, and desire into choice. That is the true power dynamic shift. Scarcity amplifies value. It's a principle that applies to emotions just as much as it applies to anything rare or meaningful in life. When something is always available, it blends into the background. It becomes ordinary, predictable, and easy to overlook. But the moment it becomes scarce, the moment the constant presence disappears, the emotional weight of it increases. Women feel this shift instantly because scarcity forces her to see what she had, what she ignored, and what she may have taken for granted. When someone's attention, time, or energy is abundant, it doesn't stand out. It becomes a given. It becomes something she subconsciously expects instead of something she appreciates. This isn't intentional. It's human nature. We stop noticing what's always there. We stop valuing what doesn't require effort. Scarcity breaks that pattern. When the energy pulls back, it interrupts the rhythm. Suddenly, what was predictable becomes uncertain, and that uncertainty heightens awareness. She starts paying attention again. She starts feeling again. She starts evaluating again. Scarcity creates contrast, and contrast creates clarity. When someone steps back, she feels the emotional void, and that void is what amplifies the significance of the connection. She may not have realized how comforting the presence was until it's not there. She may not have understood how meaningful the effort was until it pauses. Scarcity makes the mind replay the moments that were once overlooked. It pulls her attention to the emotional impact instead of the routine. And that shift is what intensifies value. Scarcity also triggers desire. Humans desire what feels limited, not what feels endless. It's not about manipulation, it's about psychology. When something becomes scarce, the mind instinctively assumes it must hold value, or else it wouldn't be missed. That realization makes her reevaluate her own behavior, her own investment, and her own interest. She starts thinking, why do I suddenly care more? Why does this absence feel louder than the presence ever did? Those questions are the beginning of emotional awareness. When someone is overly available, the connection becomes unbalanced. One person gives endlessly while the other receives without giving back equally. Scarcity levels that imbalance. It quietly communicates boundaries. It says, my energy is valuable, and it won't be poured endlessly into a space where it isn't matched. That message is powerful because it's not spoken, it's felt. Women feel the difference between someone who gives out of fear and someone who gives out of strength. Scarcity reveals strength. Scarcity also invites effort. When the energy is no longer overflowing, she becomes more intentional. She reaches out more genuinely. She engages more thoughtfully. She begins to show what she may have never expressed before because now she realizes the connection is not guaranteed. This is where true interest reveals itself, not when everything is easy, but when the ease disappears. And ultimately, scarcity amplifies value because it forces emotional recognition. It awakens appreciation. It brings awareness to what was once taken lightly. It turns something ordinary into something meaningful. Scarcity doesn't create value out of nothing. It exposes the value that was already there. But hidden beneath constant availability, women desire emotional sovereignty. It's the freedom to feel without being controlled, influenced, or emotionally overwhelmed by someone else's behavior. It's the internal strength of knowing that her emotional stability doesn't depend on another person's presence, attention, or validation. Emotional sovereignty is the space where she can breathe, think, reflect, and choose, not react. And that freedom is deeply attractive because it allows her to stay rooted in her own identity rather than losing herself in the connection. When someone pulls back, it often gives a woman the emotional room she didn't even realize she needed. She suddenly has space to process her own feelings without pressure. She's able to ask herself what she truly wants, not what she felt obligated to maintain. Emotional sovereignty cannot exist when someone is constantly present, constantly checking in, or constantly seeking reassurance. That level of intensity doesn't allow her to feel her own emotions. She ends up feeling theirs. But when there is space, her inner world becomes clearer. She reconnects with her own intuition. Women crave this autonomy because it protects their emotional well-being. Without it, they feel suffocated, overwhelmed, or responsible for someone else's insecurity. And nothing drains feminine energy faster than emotional responsibility that isn't hers. Emotional sovereignty allows her to return to herself, to reground her emotions, and to feel stable again. That stability makes connection healthier. It stops her from making decisions out of guilt or pressure, and instead allows her to act from truth. When someone respects her emotional sovereignty, it sends a powerful message. It tells her that her emotions are valid and that she is not expected to carry the entire emotional weight of the connection. It shows that there is space for her to exist as her own person, not as an emotional caretaker. And that message makes her feel safe. Safety allows her to open up more deeply. Safety allows her to trust. Safety allows her to grow. Emotional sovereignty also gives her the ability to recognize her patterns, the ones that often remain hidden when the connection feels overwhelming. When there is space, she becomes aware of what triggers her, what comforts her, and what she truly values. She learns to differentiate between attachment and genuine connection. She becomes more conscious of her boundaries, her desires, and her standards. This awareness strengthens her sense of self, making her more grounded and more authentic. Women desire emotional sovereignty because it allows them to love without losing themselves. It lets them choose their connections instead of falling into them. It gives them the power to walk away from what drains them and to invest in what supports their emotional growth. When someone steps back and allows her this space, she recognizes the maturity behind it. She sees the emotional discipline. She feels the respect, and that respect pulls her closer, not farther. In the end, emotional sovereignty is not about distance. It's about empowerment. It's the freedom to feel deeply without being controlled by those feelings. It's the strength to stay grounded even in connection. And women gravitate toward anything or anyone who honors that freedom. Stepping back highlights self-worth. When someone pulls away, it sends a subtle but powerful message that their time, energy, and presence are valuable and not to be taken for granted. It communicates confidence without words, and women sense it immediately. Self-worth is not something that can be proclaimed. It must be felt through actions. When someone steps back, it shows that they respect themselves enough to not overextend for approval or validation. That demonstration of self-respect creates a magnetic energy, one that naturally draws attention and admiration. When someone is constantly available, it can unintentionally diminish perceived value. Predictability often becomes invisibility. A woman may unconsciously take continuous attention for granted because there is no interruption, no pause, and no hint of independence. But when someone steps back, absence creates contrast. It allows her to feel the difference between what was always there and what is now consciously measured. In that space, she begins to recognize worth, not through words, but through the consistency of boundaries and the quiet strength of emotional control. Stepping back also forces reflection. Without constant presence, she begins to examine her own feelings and the role she plays in the connection. She asks herself whether she appreciates the energy that was once abundant. She realizes what was meaningful and what she may have overlooked. That reflection leads to awareness, and awareness leads to respect. When a person demonstrates that they will not chase validation or compromise their own stability, it highlights their self-worth in a way that is impossible to ignore. This action also shifts perception. Women naturally notice when someone values themselves enough to create space instead of trying to control or dominate the emotional rhythm of the relationship. Stepping back is not rejection. It is a statement that one's presence is intentional, not automatic. That intentionality signals strength, maturity, and self-confidence. These qualities illuminate self-worth, making the individual more compelling because they operate from a place of integrity, not desperation. Stepping back also sets a standard. It teaches her how to treat someone who respects themselves. It shows her that connection is a two-way street, not a one-sided performance. When energy is finite and measured, every interaction carries weight. Every moment becomes meaningful. This measured presence elevates the individual's perceived value because it shows that their involvement is earned, not given freely without discernment. That in itself is magnetic. Self-worth is further highlighted through the balance of care and independence. When someone steps back, it communicates that they are capable of maintaining their own life, their own priorities, and their own emotional equilibrium. That balance is attractive because it contrasts with dependence, neediness, or overinvestment. It shows that the connection is a choice, not a necessity, and that choice reinforces the significance of the relationship. Women sense that strength and are drawn to it instinctively. Stepping back does more than create space. It illuminates the inherent value of the person who does it. It makes them memorable, respected, and desirable because self-worth is now visible in action. The energy communicates a quiet truth. I know my value and I won't diminish it for approval. That demonstration resonates deeply, and women are naturally drawn to energy that embodies such confidence and authenticity. It reveals true intentions. When someone steps back, it strips away the pretense, the over-effort, and the noise that often clouds a connection. Without constant availability, without the safety net of predictable attention, a woman begins to see clearly who genuinely values the connection and who only reacts out of convenience or habit. Distance acts like a lens, magnifying authenticity and exposing what is real versus what is performed. In the absence of constant interaction, intentions become impossible to hide. When someone is always present, it's easy to misinterpret their behavior. Attention can feel like affection, effort can feel like commitment, and presence can feel like priority. But constant presence does not necessarily equate to genuine interest. Stepping back removes that ambiguity. It creates a pause that forces reflection. In that pause, she observes not only the absence, but her own response to it. Her reaction becomes the litmus test of true interest. Does she reach out voluntarily or does she retreat? Does she invest emotionally or does she let the connection fade? These responses reveal intentions more clearly than words ever could. Stepping back also exposes emotional motives. When energy is abundant, it can hide self-serving intentions behind gestures of care or attention. Scarcity reveals whether the effort was genuine or superficial. A woman begins to notice whether the connection is mutually enriching or one-sided. She starts to discern whether the interest was rooted in true appreciation or simply convenience, boredom, or desire for validation. Distance brings clarity, and clarity exposes the truth behind actions that once seemed ambiguous. Intentions are also revealed through consistency in absence. How someone behaves when they are not immediately visible tells more about their character than how they act when attention is guaranteed. Do they maintain integrity, or do they only show up when it suits them? Do they respect boundaries, or do they push to reclaim control? These behaviors communicate intentions silently but powerfully. Women pick up on these cues instinctively, and they form judgments not just on actions, but on the energy behind them. Stepping back allows her to witness this energy without interference. The process also highlights emotional authenticity. A person who steps back without panic or overcompensation demonstrates that their involvement is conscious, intentional, and measured. They are not acting out of fear of loss or need for validation. They are acting from self-respect and clarity. That energy signals truth. It shows that connection is not manipulative or transactional, but comes from genuine choice. And women are drawn to this honesty because it mirrors the stability and integrity they seek in a partner. Finally, stepping back gives space for evaluation. She begins to reflect on what she truly wants and who she is willing to invest in. It forces the connection into reality, removing the illusions created by constant presence. True intentions cannot hide in the quiet. They emerge naturally. Actions, reactions, and choices become transparent. In this space, authenticity is illuminated, and every hidden motive, every genuine feeling, every real priority is exposed. Stepping back doesn't push her away. It simply reveals what was already there. And in that revelation, truth becomes undeniable. Women subconsciously trust emotional discipline. It's an unspoken signal, a quiet energy that communicates stability, self-control, and strength without needing to declare it. Emotional discipline is not about suppression or coldness. It's about mastery over impulses, reactions, and unnecessary drama. When someone can navigate their emotions with balance, respond thoughtfully instead of reactively, and maintain composure under pressure, it communicates a sense of security. Women intuitively sense this energy, and it builds trust even before words are exchanged. Emotional discipline is magnetic because it removes unpredictability. When someone reacts impulsively, emotions become a roller coaster, and that volatility triggers anxiety. Constant overreactions or attention-seeking behavior forces others to manage or appease those feelings, creating imbalance. But when someone demonstrates emotional discipline, it signals that the connection will not be dictated by instability. It shows that the energy is measured, thoughtful, and intentional. Women subconsciously notice that this creates a safe emotional environment, one where they can be themselves without fear of triggering unnecessary conflict or imbalance. When someone steps back calmly instead of reacting with panic or desperation, emotional discipline is on display. That controlled response sends a clear message. The person is not swayed by fleeting emotions, does not chase validation, and maintains boundaries naturally. It communicates self-worth and self-respect, which are qualities women instinctively recognize as reliable and trustworthy. This energy creates a sense of safety and admiration because it reflects a mind and heart that are governed by purpose, not by impulsive need. Emotional discipline also demonstrates consistency. A woman can subconsciously gauge how someone will respond in different circumstances based on their ability to stay grounded. Will they overreact in moments of uncertainty, or will they navigate challenges with calm and clarity? Emotional discipline reassures her that the connection is dependable. She doesn't have to guess, worry, or manipulate to understand intentions or reactions. That predictability is not boring, it's comforting. Women are naturally drawn to energy that doesn't fluctuate unnecessarily because it allows them to relax into authenticity rather than constantly compensate for chaos. Another reason emotional discipline is trusted is that it reflects emotional maturity. It signals that someone has done the internal work to recognize, understand, and manage their feelings instead of projecting them onto others. Women sense when energy is rooted in clarity rather than insecurity. Discipline in emotions shows a person who can navigate highs and lows without creating unnecessary turmoil. That creates respect and admiration because it's rare and valuable. People who can regulate their emotional landscape inspire confidence and make others feel secure. Women subconsciously trust emotional discipline because it mirrors stability and strength. It communicates that the connection is not dependent on fear, panic, or neediness. It signals that boundaries, respect, and balance are inherent. Emotional discipline allows a woman to feel safe, seen, and valued without being controlled or overwhelmed. It reveals that the energy she's engaging with is reliable, intentional, and emotionally grounded. In that space, attraction grows naturally, not from drama or chase, but from trust, stability, and respect, all built on the foundation of emotional discipline. In the end, the truth is clear. Women are drawn not to constant pursuit, but to presence, confidence, and emotional integrity. Every act of stepping back, creating space, or maintaining emotional discipline is not withdrawal. It is a reflection of self-worth, clarity, and intentionality. These moments reveal true intentions, highlight value, and cultivate trust. Women are naturally drawn to energy that respects boundaries, demonstrates consistency, and honors their emotional sovereignty. Attraction is not about effort or chase. It is about balance, authenticity, and the silent power of someone who knows their worth and moves with purpose. In that space, connection deepens, respect grows, and love becomes genuine because it is built on truth, clarity, and mutual recognition.